The jungle air was thick, damp, and buzzing with unseen life. James Carter said, "Every stone whispers of something older than history." His voice trembled with awe. The towering pyramid of Chichen Itza loomed against the twilight sky, its shadows slicing across the mossy earth. Sarah Miller said, "You're chasing phantoms again, James." Her tone was half mockery, half fear. Yet her eyes betrayed curiosity. James brushed the dust from a carved serpent etched into the stone, feeling the grooves with trembling fingers. He whispered, "These markings don't belong to ritual. They're a map." Sarah shook her head, her arms crossed tightly, but the unease in her stance showed her resistance was cracking. In the fading light, the pyramid seemed alive, each angle catching fire from the sinking sun. The silence grew heavy, broken only by distant howls. James said, "The truth is buried here, waiting for us." The night settled heavy as shadows swallowed the pyramid. James lit a lantern, its glow spilling across carvings. He muttered, "This place was never meant for worship." Sarah replied, "You twist everything into a riddle." Her voice carried both annoyance and fear. The jungle grew louder, as if alive with whispers. James traced the symbols, eyes feverish. He said, "They built this for something they didn't want others to see." Sarah clenched her jaw, unwilling to admit the chill in her bones. The lantern flickered violently, as if answering James' words. The jungle answered with a sudden scream of howler monkeys, piercing the night. James whispered, "The truth waits inside." A gust of wind swept down the steps, carrying dry leaves across their boots. James said, "Do you feel that? It's like the pyramid breathes." Sarah scoffed, "Or maybe it's just wind in a ruin." Yet her eyes darted nervously upward. James pressed his ear to the stone, his face pale. He whispered, "It's hollow." Sarah froze, her skepticism cracking. "If you're right," she said, "then the Maya built more than just temples." The jungle noises surged, as if mocking their discovery. James stood firm, lantern trembling in his grasp. "We're standing on the threshold of something forbidden," he said. Sarah's patience cracked. "You think every ruin hides some cosmic secret," she said. Her voice echoed against stone. James ignored her, scratching chalk marks onto parchment, copying glyphs. "These align with stars," he said, obsession in his tone. Sarah stepped closer, her skepticism drowned by fear. "And if you find what you're looking for, what then?" James paused, eyes distant. "Then the world changes." The jungle's chorus dimmed, replaced by silence, unnatural and heavy. Sarah whispered, "Sometimes secrets are buried for a reason." But James' hand trembled, unwilling to stop. Hours passed as the moon climbed high. The pyramid glowed silver, its steps etched with ghostly shadows. James murmured, "This isn't history, it's warning." Sarah said, "Then walk away." Her voice broke under strain. But James' obsession had teeth. He stared at the top of the pyramid, jaw tight. "Up there," he said, "the truth waits." Sarah shuddered, clutching her satchel close. "You'll drag us into darkness," she whispered. James stepped forward, the lantern swinging. The pyramid seemed to pulse under moonlight, each stone alive with hidden fire. Their path had only just begun. The jungle seemed to lean closer as James paced beneath the looming pyramid. His lantern sputtered, throwing long shadows. James Carter said, "The air grows heavier the deeper we go." Sarah Miller muttered, "Or maybe it's your obsession weighing on us." Her eyes flicked to the trees, where faint movements stirred. A figure stepped from the darkness, cloaked and still. His voice was low, echoing like stone. The informant said, "You seek a truth that devours." James froze, his breath caught. Sarah whispered, "Who are you?" The informant tilted his head, features hidden in shadow. He said, "Follow the serpent, and the stone will speak." Then he melted back into the dark. James' hands trembled, his mind ablaze. "He knows," he muttered. Sarah clenched her fists, her voice tight. "Or he wants us dead." The jungle swallowed the silence whole. The night deepened, pressing like a weight. James scribbled notes furiously on parchment, his lantern flickering with every frantic movement. Sarah Miller said, "You're listening to riddles from a ghost." James snapped. He spoke of the serpent. The pyramid is the serpent. His finger jabbed at the carved glyphs. Sarah rubbed her temples, muttering, "You're twisting myth into madness." Yet her voice quivered. The jungle chorus faltered, replaced by eerie silence. James whispered, "The stars align with the serpent's path. This is no accident." Sarah shivered, clutching her satchel tighter. "If you're right, then this isn't discovery, it's warning." James' jaw tightened as he stared at the glowing serpent carving, the faint lines seeming alive. He said, "Warnings are just truths too dangerous to face." An owl screeched overhead, startling Sarah. James didn't flinch, eyes locked on the pyramid steps. He said, "We climb now." Sarah hissed, "At night? You'll kill us." James replied, "The truth waits for no dawn." His lantern cast trembling light across uneven stone. Sarah clenched her fists, muttering, "You're dragging me into madness." James climbed the first step, sweat glistening on his brow. He said, "Every step is a key." Sarah followed reluctantly, her breath quick. The jungle seemed to fall silent with each step upward. James whispered, "Listen." The stones hum. Sarah paused, hearing faint vibrations beneath her feet. Her face paled. She whispered, "That's not wind." James' eyes burned as he pressed forward. "The pyramid is alive," he said. Halfway up, Sarah stopped, chest heaving. "This is madness," she said. James turned, his eyes burning with obsession. "You feel it too." The hum. Sarah's lips trembled, unwilling to admit it. A sudden voice drifted from above. The informant said, "Higher, seeker. But beware, the serpent coils around those who trespass." His figure flashed at the top, then vanished into shadow. Sarah gasped, clutching her satchel. "He's watching us," she whispered. James' hand tightened around the lantern. "Then he knows we're close," Sarah muttered. "Or he leads us to ruin." James faced the steps again, his jaw set. He said, "Ruin or revelation, it makes no difference." The pyramid loomed above, swallowing stars in its silhouette. They reached a plateau, the jungle sprawling far below. James' lantern flickered weakly, its flame nearly spent. Sarah's voice cracked, "This is too far." James stared at the horizon, eyes wild. "Too far is where truth lives." His words chilled her. The plateau floor bore carvings of coiled serpents, each scale etched in painstaking detail. Sarah whispered, "It's a warning etched in stone." James knelt, tracing the carvings. "It's a map," he said, voice trembling. A gust of wind tore across the plateau, extinguishing the lantern. Darkness swallowed them. Sarah clutched James' arm, panic in her breath. He whispered, "Do you hear it? The stone breathes." And beneath them, faint vibrations pulsed like a hidden heart. Dawn crept over limestone as mist pooled on the plateau. James checked the gear and frowned at frayed rope fibers. James Carter said, "Someone touched our kit." Sarah Miller said, "Or the jungle chewed it." A new voice slid from the chill with polished ease. Lucas Ward said, "University liaison, here to assist your permit." James studied the stranger, weighing the smile that came too fast. Lucas Ward said, "You are hunting alignments, yes?" Sarah watched his hands instead of his grin. Their maps rustled, edges filmed with oil that stank like kerosene. James Carter said, "We did not spill that." Lucas shrugged, all charm and empty shoulders. Sarah Miller said, "Then someone wants us blind." The hum underfoot returned, steady as breath. James lifted the lantern and faced the steps. James Carter said, "We proceed, with or without help." The sun burned off the mist and showed the damage. Chalk marks faded to ghosts across parchment. Sarah Miller said, "Riddles and ruin, your favorite pair." A woman waited at the edge with a woven satchel. Ana Torres said, "My brother vanished near the sacred water." A pendant lay in her palm, etched with the coiled serpent. James Carter said, "Where did you get that?" Ana held his stare without flinching. Ana Torres said, "He left it with a note about tunnels." Lucas Ward sighed and flicked a glance at the jungle. Lucas Ward said, "Souvenir sellers carve anything." Sarah's eyes hardened over a single word. Sarah Miller said, "He wrote node, not note." The hum rose and timed itself to their breath. James matched a nick on the pendant to a glyph scar. James Carter said, "She's our map, like it or not." They found a narrow shaft, masked by vines and dust. James anchored a line and tested the weight. Sarah Miller said, "If this fails, we do not." Lucas Ward said, "I will belay, trust my knots." The rope felt waxy where it should be rough. James Carter said on descent. He lowered himself, boots skimming chalky walls. 10 feet down, fibers parted with a sick whisper. Sarah seized the line and braced, heels grinding stone. Lucas fumbled and offered apologies that sounded rehearsed. James swung, hit hard, and clung to a ledge with scraped palms. Sarah Miller said, "Climb now." The shaft exhaled dust and a buried gong of sound. James hauled up and stared at the cut ends. James Carter said, "This was treated." Lucas Ward said, "Humidity, nothing more." Night folded over camp and turned faces to masks of coal and fire. Ana opened a stained notebook bound in twine. Ana Torres said, "He mapped echoes, not paths." Graph lines traced a spine that matched the serpent. Sarah Miller said, "Acoustic nodes spaced like steps." James Carter said, "Amplifiers built in stone." A whisper drifted from beyond the light. The informant said, "Your steps wake what sleeps." Lucas fed the fire and smiled at shadows. A radio cracked with static and clipped authority. A voice said, "Cease work or lose your permit." Sarah listened and knew that tone. Sarah Miller said, "The keeper's hand." James bowed over the notebook like a vow. James Carter said, "We continue at first light." Ana held the pendant and blinked back grief. Dawn bled along the terrace and found a seam in the floor. Ana traced a groove to a false joint. James Carter said, "Pressure plate." Lucas Ward said, "Or a tail to frighten tourists." Sarah tested the slab with a pole and waited. The hinge sighed, and a corridor gaped like a throat. Cold air spilled out with the stink of minerals. They stepped in as the floor dropped with a roar. James shoved Ana through a narrow gap as dust boiled. Sarah dragged James clear while stones hammered shut. Lucas stood apart, eyes bright with something unreadable. Sarah Miller said, "You were ready for that." Lucas Ward said, "I am ready for many things." The hum surged and fluttered in ribs and teeth. James Carter said, "We go deeper, and we watch the gear." Ana drew a breath that tasted of lime and resolve. Dust settled in the corridor like slow rain, coating tongues and tempers. James Carter said, "Check the packs," and his voice came out ragged. Sarah Miller said, "The straps were cut, not worn." Ana Torres traced a dark smear and swallowed hard. Ana Torres said, "Same oil from the rope." Lucas Ward smiled thinly, all clean teeth and calm. Lucas Ward said, "You hear hoofbeats and shout tiger." The hum returned, deeper now, a pulse in stone and ribs. James Carter said, "Either help or stand clear." The floor clicked under Ana's boot and held. Sarah Miller said, "He wants us rushing." James mapped the cracks with chalk and patience. The tunnel breathed cold, and the chalk trembled in his hand. They entered a chamber painted with serpents, each scale a glyph of breath and star. Sarah Miller said, "These nodes are distances, not dates." James Carter said, "Echoes charted as a map." Ana Torres pointed to a scratched mark near the rim. Ana Torres said, "My brother cut this when he was scared." Lucas Ward offered a translation that slid too easily. Lucas Ward said, "It reads, abandon hope, nothing else." Sarah raised a brow at the lie and let it hang. Sarah Miller said, "It reads bind the voice to open." The hum synchronized with their lungs, a measured cadence. James pressed his ear to the wall and smiled without warmth. James Carter said, "The door listens." The floor plate groaned, and a stone grill slid between them and daylight. Lucas Ward moved faster than thought and seized the pendant. Lucas Ward said, "Authority revokes your permit now." James Carter said, "Who is your authority?" The radio on Lucas' belt crackled like a nest of bees. A woman's voice arrived smooth as ice. "The Keeper of Secrets said proceed to extraction point, Mr. Ward." "Nest." Sarah Miller said, "He cut the rope and the straps." Lucas's smile finally fit his eyes. Lucas Ward said, "Truth in the wrong hands burns libraries." Ana Torres stepped forward. Grief turned to iron. Ana Torres said, "You used my brother." The hum rose until it rattled teeth and courage. They emerged into a cavern where a cenote breathed cold blue light. A platform hung over the water like a held breath. The radio voice became a woman in flesh and patience. Dr. Helena Strauss said, "Return the pendant and leave this place intact." James Carter said, "Keeper of Secrets at last." She smiled like a sealed vault. Dr. Helena Strauss said, "Knowledge requires caretakers, not arsonists." Sarah Miller said, "You salt the earth to own it." Lucas watched for orders and found none. Ana Torres held her ground and lifted her chin. Ana Torres said, "My brother died for your caretaking." The hum thickened, and the water quivered to its rhythm. James tested the air with a soft whistle, and the walls answered like tuned drums. Sarah Miller said, "3 notes, low, mid, high." Dr. Helena Strauss said, "Close that door, Mr. Ward." Lucas Ward lifted the pendant and misjudged the pitch. The slabs shuddered but refused him. Ana Torres matched her brother's pattern with a steady hum. Ana Torres said, "Hold the middle, I take high." James Carter said, "I anchor low." Their voices braided, and stone relented with a sigh. The platform unlocked, and a hidden stair unfurled. Dr. Helena Strauss said, "You will drown in what you wake." James looked back once, calm as flint. James Carter said, "Then we learn to swim." The stair wound downward, spiraling into a cavern heavy with damp air. James Carter said, "Every breath tastes like stone." Sarah Miller pressed her hand to the wall, whispering, "It vibrates like a drum." Ana Torres stopped near an alcove, eyes wide. Ana Torres said, "My brother carved here." Fresh gouges scored the limestone, desperate, unfinished. Lucas Ward muttered, "He broke protocol and paid." Dr. Helena Strauss's voice echoed from above. Dr. Helena Strauss said, "He trespassed into knowledge meant for silence." James growled, "No one owns silence." The hum rose into a steady throb, forcing dust from cracks. Sarah said, "The pyramid sings through bones." James' jaw clenched. James Carter said, "And the song has a victim." They reached a chamber lined with skeletal remains, each bound with ropes of vine. Sarah Miller whispered, "Not offerings, they were prisoners." James Carter knelt, brushing dirt from a skull. James Carter said, "This was warning, not worship." Ana Torres shuddered, holding her pendant tight. Ana Torres said, "My brother walked into this grave." Lucas Ward said, "History keeps its order with blood." Sarah snapped, "You mean you keep it with lies?" Dr. Helena Strauss descended slowly, boots crunching on bones. Dr. Helena Strauss said, "Sacrifice was survival. Without silence, chaos consumes." James stood, fists clenched. James Carter said, "Truth is no chaos. It's light." The hum quivered, and the chamber rattled like a heartbeat. Water dripped in rhythmic beats, echoing against glyph walls. James Carter said, "These symbols trace a cycle of silence and voice." Sarah Miller ran her fingers across the grooves. Sarah Miller said, "It's a lock, not scripture." Ana Torres held the pendant over a carved hollow. Ana Torres said, "He marked this spot before he vanished." Lucas Ward sneered, his hand hovering too close. Lucas Ward said, "Perhaps he vanished by choice." Sarah snapped, "You fear discovery more than death." The pendant pulsed with faint glow in Ana's hand. James Carter whispered, "The victim isn't gone, he's bound here." The hum swelled until the water trembled, forming ripples shaped like scales. The chamber cracked with sudden force, a hidden door grinding open. A hollow cry echoed, neither human nor stone. Sarah Miller gasped, "That's not wind." James Carter's eyes burned. James Carter said, "It's him, Ana's brother." Ana staggered forward, tears streaking dust. Ana Torres said, "Diego, answer me." From within, a gaunt figure stumbled, skin etched with serpent scars. Diego Torres whispered, "The stone sang, and I could not stop." Lucas Ward stepped between, blocking the path. Lucas Ward said, "He stays, or all this collapses." Dr. Helena Strauss said, "One sacrifice preserves the world." Sarah clenched her fists, fury shaking her voice. Sarah Miller said, "You call theft preservation." The hum screamed like a breaking sky. The chamber shook as Diego collapsed into Ana's arms. Ana Torres said, "He's alive but broken." Diego whispered, "The pyramid breathes through me." James Carter turned on Strauss, rage lit in his eyes. James Carter said, "You kept him here to guard your silence." Dr. Helena Strauss said, "He chose the role." Sarah Miller spat, "You twisted choice into chains." Lucas Ward stepped closer, his tone flat. Lucas Ward said, "One voice keeps the serpent asleep." The hum turned violent, shaking dust and stone. Diego coughed blood and whispered, "If I leave, it wakes." Ana sobbed, clinging tighter. James Carter whispered, "Then we face what they fear." Strauss's calm cracked into a frown. The stair beyond the cenote turned into a throat of stone that pulsed with cold. James Carter said, "We follow the nodes until the pitch breaks." Sarah Miller said, "Or until our ribs crack first." Ana Torres steadied Diego as his breath cinched to the hum. Diego Torres whispered, "It wants me to sing again." Dr. Helena Strauss said, "One voice sustains the seal, and that is the only mercy left." Lucas Ward tested a side door and smiled without mirth. Lucas Ward said, "Mechanisms love simple lies." A hidden latch clicked and the floor shifted like a tired animal. Sarah Miller said, "Enough tricks, we move together." James Carter said, "Ana leads with the pendant, I count the beats." The corridor exhaled a colder note that tasted like rust and rain. Diego shivered and stared into the dark. Diego Torres whispered, "It knows we came." They stepped onto a stone bridge that hung over a shaft black enough to erase breath. James Carter said, "4 beats, step, 4 beats, step, dot." The hum rolled underfoot like distant thunder. Sarah Miller said, "It changes on purpose." A figure waited in the opposite arch, still as a carved saint. The informant said, "The serpent hates steady feet." Lucas Ward laughed into the chasm. Lucas Ward said, "Then, let it love me." He took 2 quick strides and the bridge flexed with a groan. Dr. Helena Strauss said, "Return, or you fall with your pride." The informant tilted his head and beckoned with 2 fingers. The informant said, "Sink to Diego, not to fear." Diego Torres sang a low thread of sound that trembled the stones. Ana Torres said, "Hold his note and move." The bridge delivered them into a round chamber built like a drum. James Carter said, "Stone lung." The walls held niches shaped as throats, each tuned to a different ache. Sarah Miller said, 3 keys, 1 lock." Lucas Ward slid beside Ana with a soft smile. Lucas Ward said, "Let me lighten your burden." He grabbed the pendant and pulled hard. Ana Torres said, "You always reach for the wrong heart." Diego coughed and the pitch dipped like a dying star. The floor shuddered, and a grate snapped open under Lucas. Dr. Helena Strauss said, "Stand down or stay down." Lucas Ward hung by his elbows, eyes bright with shock. James Carter hauled him up, and did not thank himself. James Carter said, "No more cuts. You play with us or the pyramid eats you." The informant stepped into the chamber and traced a curve on the floor with 2 fingers. The informant said, "Your map is breath and shadow." Sarah Miller said, "Then cast the shadow right." Dr. Helena Strauss keyed her radio and listened to silence that felt like orders. Dr. Helena Strauss said, "You cross, I close. The world survives the cost." James Carter said, "No more living locks." Diego Torres rasped a note that trembled toward a door hidden in dull rock. Ana Torres said, "He cannot hold this alone." Lucas Ward stared at his hands as if they were strangers. Lucas Ward said, "I hear the key I tried to break." The informant smiled with tired mercy. The informant said, "Stand in the node you feared." The walls swelled with a breath older than fire. They tuned themselves like a chord struck against the ribs of the earth. James Carter said, "Low on 4." Sarah Miller said, "Middle steady." Ana Torres said, "High with me, Diego." Diego Torres bled a thin line of sound that hurt to hear. Lucas Ward joined, voice rough as rope, and the door unlatched with a hollow sigh. Dr. Helena Strauss said, "You have no measure for what waits." The informant said, "Measures are prisons with rulers." The slab rolled back and revealed steps that drank the light. Cold rose like a tide from a well too deep to name. James Carter said, "Sanctum." Sarah Miller said, "End of the map, dot." Ana Torres took Diego's hand and nodded once. They stepped down as the hum died into a silence that felt like teeth. The sanctum opened into a vast hollow where the ceiling glittered like a night sky frozen in stone. James Carter said, "The serpent is no myth, it's a design." Sarah Miller said, "A machine carved to breathe." Ana Torres steadied Diego as his scars glowed faintly with the rhythm. Diego Torres whispered, "It sings inside me." Dr. Helena Strauss said, "You unseal what they buried with blood." Lucas Ward muttered, "We are already too deep to retreat." The informant pointed at the wall of veins pulsing with pale light. The informant said, "Truth waits in chambers men should never own." James Carter lifted the lantern high, eyes burning. James Carter said, "We end this by opening, not hiding." The serpent mural uncoiled into motion, scales glowing as if molten. Sarah Miller said, "It's alive." James Carter said, "No, it's memory carved to last." Ana Torres pressed the pendant into Diego's hand. Ana Torres said, "You choose if it breathes or breaks." Diego staggered and sang, his voice torn with pain. Lucas Ward said, "Seal it before it consumes." Dr. Helena Strauss said, "He was chosen. Let him stay bound." Sarah Miller shouted, "You will not chain him again." The informant whispered, "Balance requires both silence and voice." James Carter touched the mural, heat burning his palm. James Carter said, "We open everything." The sanctum shook with a roar older than words. The sanctum cracked open, revealing a chamber of mirrors where fire and water collided. James Carter said, "The pyramid was built to cage the earth itself." Sarah Miller said, "Every sacrifice kept this prison closed." Diego fell to his knees, blood staining his lips. Diego Torres said, "I cannot hold the song." Ana Torres clutched him close, tears carving lines in dust. Ana Torres said, "Then I will hold it with you." Lucas Ward lifted the radio, trembling. Lucas Ward said, "Command, the lock is breaking." Dr. Helena Strauss snatched it away, smashing it under her boot. Dr. Helena Strauss said, "We hold nothing, we witness." The informant stepped forward, voice calm. The informant said, "Witnessing is surrender. Act or drown." The ground split into a spiral pit, heat gusting upward like a furnace. Sarah Miller said, "We cannot hold it closed anymore." James Carter said, "Then we channel it, not seal it." Ana Torres kissed Diego's forehead, whispering, "Your pain ends here." Diego Torres gave her the pendant with shaking hands. Diego Torres said, "Let the serpent breathe free." Lucas Ward stepped back, fear hollowing his face. Lucas Ward said, "If it rises, the world burns." Dr. Helena Strauss said, "Or it burns the rot that chained it." The informant raised his arms, voice like stone. The informant said, "Releases always cost." James Carter hurled the pendant into the spiral. Light erupted, swallowing breath and shadow alike. Silence followed the blast, heavy as burial earth. The hum was gone, the serpent freed or erased. James Carter whispered, "We gave the truth its breath." Sarah Miller said, "And lost our chains with it." Ana Torres cradled Diego, whose eyes closed in peace. Ana Torres said, "He rests at last." Lucas Ward sat broken on the stones, the weight of failure in his stare. Lucas Ward said, "No keeper remains." Dr. Helena Strauss looked at the shattered chamber, lips pressed thin. Dr. Helena Strauss said, "Truth consumes faster than fire." The informant stepped into fading glow. The informant said, "Knowledge is never lost, only carried forward." James Carter turned toward the dawn, spilling through the crack above. James Carter said, "Then we climb out carrying it."